mandatory for just government too?
It's not mandatory for government as far as I know, but you guys for this class have to go. So let's say though that there's some kind. Hey, Forrest, do you want to turn that heat to the right all the way for me?
Let's say we have a track meet.
Let's say you have a track meet. That happens every year. If in the event that there's a track meet, then that's an excuse. Okay, but someone from your group has to be there to present. Someone has to be. Okay. Now, if one of you just decides to skip and you have nothing better, you know, it's not like you have a reason. If it's like, oh, I have work that day, I'll say tough cookies. This is something that's mandatory. You got to go. But if it's a school-related thing, like the track meet that you got to be there, I understand. Okay? Yes?
Okay, I have a question.
Yes.
For softball,
yes.
Our game on the 20th is at 2.
Okay.
Can I leave early from that?
Of course you can. And I'll collect your medal after you win.
So I'm going to have to go, like...
Every year we do it. Don't worry. We'll talk about it later. I know. Every year it happens. Let's just get through it.
Okay.
All right. So now let's get back to that scramble for Africa. Yesterday we were talking about European domination of these quote-unquote lesser countries. Because what is the driving mentality in Europe at this point that's making them think they're better? What's it called? Okay, they don't have a flag. Exactly. Okay, racism. I want the term. This is a term that came up in your reading.
Social Darwinism.
Thank you. Social Darwinism. Now, which British thinker came up with the concept of social Darwinism?
Huxley.
Not Darwin. Huxley. Not Huxley.
Judson.
Not Jetson. No, it doesn't. Herbert Spencer. All right, Herbert Spencer was the British thinker that applied Charles Darwin's theory to humanity, right? And said that this is survival of the fittest in the world, and therefore it's similar to manifest destiny. God made white people, white Europeans, better. Therefore, it's their job to go around the globe. And then he also felt, well, the Brits are inherently better than, say, the dirty Germans or the Italians. So therefore, when it comes to imperialism, what are the Brits supposed to do? Own more, dominate, imperialize more, exactly. All right, that brings us into some conflicts, some definite conflicts, because not only are the results of imperialism bad for the people being imperialized, but it leads us on the path to war in Europe as well. All right, so a good example of the effects on the people of Africa, though. We've got a battle, a very significant battle, where, I don't have my map of Africa anywhere around here, but if you look up at the map there of Africa, the Brits were in Egypt, right? So they were having some problems with a guy known as the Khalifa. So, not Wiz Khalifa, but a different Khalifa. So, the Khalifa, he was the Muslim leader of the northern part of Sudan. And so he kind of had this whole region that he was just kind of running with his own little dictatorial powers. Now, numerous Brits had gone into this area trying to like set up shop, trying to establish relations, and they kept getting butchered. Has anyone seen the movie The Four Feathers? By the way, it's got Heath Ledger from the 90s, late 90s. Okay, so if you ever want to see a movie about it, there's a good movie about it. All right, so Heath Ledger, I know, so awesome. Okay, it's so pretty, right, Eloise? So pretty. All right, so these guys were trying to set up shop. They really ticked off the Brits when they went in and killed their British redcoats. And so the Brits said, well, to heck with this Khalifa. Let's send in our army to go own him, right? And so who was the general who was sent in to do it?
Winston Churchill.
No, he was not a general yet. He was just a mere, I think, lieutenant. Anyone? Herbert Kitchener, Lord Kitchener. All right, so Lord Kitchener was sent south along the Nile into the Sudan, and as he was going, what was he building to help logistically supply his troops? Railroads. He was also bringing a gunboat flotilla down the Nile with him to start and scare the heck out of the Khalifa's forces, and it will be significant because all along the way he's just destroying anyone who's in his who's opposing him. It will finally culminate outside the city, the capital city of Omdurman. And so the Khalifa was hanging out in Omdurman. Basically, you've got this huge fortress city, and then on the outskirts of it, they had this massive desert. So the Khalifa was getting his forces ready on the hills around Omdurman in these massive sand dunes. Herbert Kitchener decided to put his troops right here along the Nile and put them out in this one thin line. And along the lines of this thin line, what kinds of weapons did he put there? Gatling guns and Maxim guns as well. So artillery and machine guns all along this line. A Maxim gun is it fires a large shell, large caliber shell, and it fires really rapidly. So it's not a machine gun, but it's a fast firing artillery shell. It's like boom, 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 just a big explosion too. So, and then all along the river, what's he got sitting here to protect his men from behind? Gunboat flotilla. So what kind of chances do the barbarian, quote-unquote, Omdurman soldiers have at taking them out? They're not good. From about 3,000 yards away, the British forces were able to start decimating the Khalifa's lines as they were attacking in waves. They had tens of thousands of Khalifa forces that were trying to attack the Brits here, and tens of thousands were getting butchered along the way.
They have guns? Or?
No, they had swords, and maybe a couple of them had some rifles, but even then, they had to get within about 100 yards to use them.
Bow and arrow?
So, no, it was mostly swords and a few rifles, very few.
How do you spell
Khalifa, I think it's K-A-H-L-I-F-A. No, it's a K. It's a K with this one. Okay. So, as far as I've always seen it spelled. Alright, so the Brits, they had modern weapons and modern tactics. By the way, they also had an awesome force who's just, making his way in the world at this point. Who is that man? Winston Churchill, serving in the cavalry, yes. All right, so Winston Churchill, he had first served in Afghanistan as a journalist and a volunteer soldier, volunteer officer. Then after that, he decided to do the same thing in the Kitchener's forces here. And he served in the cavalry, and there was this crazy scene in which the cavalry decided to attack the Khalifa's forces and try and outflank them. So as these guys are running at the British ranks, the British cavalry run around the side to try and outflank them. And Winston Churchill was in the mix. So at one point, the Khalifa's forces got down on their knees, and they brought their few rifles up to the front and had their swords and spears ready. And the cavalry thought, well, here's our glorious charge. So Churchill, like the other men, drew their swords and just went gloriously at this line of Khalifa forces, thinking they'd get butchered, right? So, for some reason, what happened was the Khalifa forces didn't even fire on them until after they jumped over them. So, the cavalry just went riding, jumped over these guys, and then ended up in the middle, and they went, oh crap, we're right in the middle of this big group of angry forces. And so they turn around, and they're like, oh no! And they start butchering like crazy and pulling out their pistols and just capping them in the face. And somehow, Churchill made it out of that mess. Whew, somehow, all right, man. So, awesome scene, awesome times for Churchill, but not so good for the Khalifa's forces. We get this quote here from Churchill. No need to write it down. He tells us, these extraordinary foreign figures march up one by one from the darkness of barbarism to the footlights of civilization, and their conquerors, taking their possessions, forget even their names. Nor will history record such trash. How does he feel about these people? Does he respect them so much? As he's saying, they are the darkness of barbarism, footlights of civilization, meaning Britain's lines, right? Getting butchered by him. And their conquerors, meaning the Brits, taking their possessions, forget even their names, nor will history remember this trash. They are not worthy opponents. Exactly. All right, so, and then another English observer said it was not a battle, but an execution. So, they had... it was several thousand. I mean, they had enough guys, but there were far more. I think they were outnumbered 4-1 by the Khalifa's forces, and yet, you can see the death toll here. There were 11,000 Khalifa forces that were killed on the field of battle right there at Omdurman, compared to 28 British soldiers that were killed. So, pretty significant difference here in the casualty rates, and so that is an example of the effects of what can happen to imperialized people as they're getting butchered by modern European warfare. All right, and then you've got this issue at Fashoda. The way to remember Fashoda is it's a showdown at Fashoda, right? We're going to have a showdown at Fashoda. Because what happened was after Kitchener took Omdurman, he's headed further south. And while he's headed further south along the Nile, the French are going to end up going to the east. What's going to happen? They're going to collide, exactly. And so they met each other at the town of Fashoda. Now, there was this funny, awkward showdown that happened, where once both sides arrived at the village, the Brits were like, oh, there's the dirty French. And then the French showed up at the exact same time, they're like, oh, there's the dirty Brits. And they all kind of nervously pointed their guns at each other and just waited. So the officers went out and talked briefly, and they were like, well, this kind of sucks. We both have claim over this territory. I think we were here first. And then the French guy's like, no, actually, I think we were here first. And they're like, oh, really, fool? And so it almost turned into a slap fest. So at that point, both guys went back to their armies, telegraphed their countries, and said, yo, they're here, we're here, should we kill them? And then, what do you think's going to happen? Nothing. Thankfully, nothing. Oh, man, because if anything had happened here at Fashoda, what would happen in Europe?
War.
War in Europe! And would it just be the Brits versus the French in Europe and Africa? What would it be? It would be everywhere. And so that's giving us an idea of what can happen here between the imperial powers. And it's going to get worse once we start the 20th century. And I'll give you examples of that when we start the next topic and get into World War I. But Germany is going to be the one that's going to start doing some muscle flexing, and they're going to get themselves in trouble. Another example of how powers are getting themselves in trouble is right here with the Boer War. What were the Brits doing in the Boer War? Who was living in South Africa when the Brits showed up? Dutch Afrikaners. All right, so not to mention the native peoples, right? But the Dutch Afrikaners had already set up shop, and they were farming. And what did guys like Cecil Rhodes find in the soil below those farmers? Diamonds and gold, exactly. And so they want them. And so the British came in droves, and the Dutch Afrikaners didn't like it. So what kind of war do we have? All right, we had the Boer War. It was both a guerrilla war and a traditional war because the Dutch Afrikaners, they had advanced European weaponry. And so are the Brits going to, just have an easy go of things here in the Boer War like they did at Omdurman? No, it's going to be a brutal, bloody war. I mean, the Brits were losing thousands upon thousands of men, both dead and wounded, in the midst of this thing. And as it was happening, the Germans decided to be kind of nasty, and they sent a little telegram to the Dutch Afrikaners and said, hey, good show, gentlemen. Way to stick it to the Brits. All right? Once the Brits found that out, because they heard about it immediately, how do you think they're feeling about Germany? Hate them, exactly. By the way, who was fighting here in the Boer War and got captured after his train was attacked, and then he was sent to a POW again, and then escaped, and then lived to write about it?
Winston.
Yes, Winston Churchill! In the office, I've got some. You want to go? Thank you. All right, so it's all about gold and diamonds against these Dutch Afrikaners, and they're going to have some bloody battles. But the point here is, it's getting ugly, right? Because we've got this incredibly competitive system that has developed. This European system of alliances that have developed here makes it so that a major war is possible at any moment. We got it? Man, I love Winston Churchill. He's so cool. Seriously. All right, very good. So now moving on. Let's look at the responses, reactions to imperialism. I'll get to it later. So the reactions to imperialism. We've got lots of negative reactions that are developing at this point. You guys still need that?
Yeah.
That helpful? All right, I'll leave it for a minute. So we've gotten lots of negative reactions to imperialism at this point. So let's think about it for a second. You've got a lot of people in the age of imperialism who are in favor of imperialism saying what kinds of things to justify their actions. Social Darwinism. We are inherently better. Therefore, it's our job to go and help these people, right? And so, what's the term that we use to describe where people are going and selflessly sacrificing in order to help someone? Rudyard Kipling's poetry is especially indicative of this. Burden. No. It's burden, but I'm taking on this burden to help educate these people. All right, yes, so that's the title, but I'm taking on this burden. What's the vocab term from last year? Altruism. There we go. So what's altruism mean? Huh? Yes, okay, define it for me. Because I expect that in your essay. If you write an essay about imperialism, if I don't see an altruism thrown down in there, then I'm going to be upset. So what do you think?
It's like your divine right, or it's like your job to go and help people who are less, I don't know.
But what if it costs you something? What if it costs you time and money, Lauren? But wait a second. What if it costs you your life? Oh, but why is it your burden?
It's your duty.
Why is it your duty?
It's your white man.
Oh, it's your right. And God made you that way to be awesome, right? According to Kipling, anyway. All right, so Kipling, remember, when did he write The White Man's Burden? Okay, now, all right, so 1898. But yes, when? What was the event? Why did he write it? No. Why did he write it? To whom did he write it?
The Queen.
He wrote it to the Americans after the Spanish-American War. Why? Why did he dedicate it to the Americans after the Spanish-American War? They took over the Philippines. Remember, how were the Filipinos reacting to that? They hated it, so they fought a guerrilla war, and the Americans sent out an order saying, kill everyone over 10, because that's what it's going to take in order to suppress this Filipino revolt. And so in response to that, you'd think people would be like, yo, you can't do that. But instead, what are the educated, elite, white folk of Europe saying? Like Kipling. Oh, yay, this is a good thing. Well, that's not the only reaction we see. Occasionally we see some critics, and so I'm going to fly through these really quick for you because you've read about some of them already. Like J.A. Hobson. He was in your reading from last night, if I recall correctly. Yes. Yes. So J.A. Hobson, he was a thinker who told us that imperialism is due to unregulated capitalism. The reason we have these terrible things happening in imperialism is because too much capitalism, which creates this surplus of goods in Europe, and if we can't have enough of a market to sell this surplus of goods, what are we going to do with all this stuff? Where are we going to send it? Okay, now let's think like capitalists for a second. I've got a factory. I've produced too much wealth, too many products. People are not buying it, so I'm going to lose money, aren't I? So what do I got to do with that stuff?
Send it elsewhere.
Sell it to the colonies. What if they don't want it?
Force
it! Yes, all right. So there you go, J.A. Hobson. Another thing that he said is that this diverts attention away from class conflict at home. So as a socialist thinker, J.A. Hobson is definitely biased here, but he's saying, you know what? The reason they're doing this is because they don't want us to be thinking about the real problems at home, like class conflict. Instead, we're going to direct it elsewhere. We also get a famous saying, contemporary saying at this time. I don't know who said it. It was kind of an anonymous thing. They said, "Blessed are the strong, for they shall prey upon the weak," like the Africans or the Filipinos or the you name it. Then we've got Joseph Conrad in The Heart of Darkness, a book that you guys are going to read. So remember, Joseph Conrad, his protagonist in the story, ends up going into the heart of which Belgian-conquered territory? Congo. So he goes into the Congo, and as he's getting deeper and deeper into the heart of Africa, what's happening to this protagonist? Turning into a barbarian, turning less and less civilized, exactly. And so the main idea behind Joseph Conrad's theory, or thoughts in Heart of Darkness, is that imperialism is pure and utter selfishness on the part of white Europeans. And then finally we get a poem here from Henry Labouchere, who writes a poem called the Brown Mansburg. No need to write it down, but man, this is a great poem if you were ever to consider writing about an imperialism essay. Might be good to throw this thing down a little bit. So Henry Labouchere does a little play on the whole white man's burden that we see with Rudyard Kipling, and instead tells us, "Pile on the brown man's burden, and if ye rouse his hate, meet his old-fashioned reasons with maxims up to date, with shells and dum-dum bullets 100 times plain. The brown man's loss must never imply the white man's gain." That's what he's talking about. These old-fashioned, uncivilized people who hate you, he's being satirical here. What should you do to them? All right, what's a maxim again? It's the big gun, exactly, rapid-firing artillery. And dum-dum bullets, anyone know what those are? They're soft-tipped bullets that when they hit your body, they expand inside your body. They're soft-tipped bullets, so they are far more deadly than a standard bullet that we have today that goes into your skin and stays whole. Instead, it goes, shatters everything inside your body. All right, and then, so yeah, definitely a satirical piece here on the brown man's burden. Definitely a different perspective than what we get in the white man's burden, or in the poem If, or in the book, The Jungle Book. You guys remember The Jungle Book by Kipling?
Yes.
Pro-imperialism. Civilize these people. Get them out of the wild. Turn them into better humans. All right, did we get all that? If you ever want to see that, the lines for that poem, if you want to use it in an essay, I can get it to you later. But first I want to get this going, because we don't have a whole lot of time. So what we're going to do is stage a little parliamentary debate. You guys are going to get into groups. You can get into study groups if you'd like, or you can get into groups with people that you think agree with you on this topic. But the year is 1913. You are going to be a member of the British Parliament, and today, let me explain the rules here. Today you're going to debate with each other the issue of imperialism. So in your study groups, take a stance on the following issues and prepare a short speech that we'll present before Parliament. So number one, has imperialism been a success or failure for the Brits? We can cite examples. What reasons do the Brits have for continuing or discontinuing their imperialistic endeavors? Next one, what could be the consequences in Europe of continued imperialistic pursuits? And does imperialism cause unwanted competition with other European nations? And finally, should Parliament continue to financially support the economic, materialistic, social-cultural goals of new imperialism around the globe? All right? So, I think what we'll do, since our time is limited, is go ahead and get into groups with people that you want to debate this with or discuss it with. come up with some ideas, and then rather than writing out a speech, we're going to get together and just argue it like we usually do. Sound good?
Who was the last?
True parliamentary fashion.
Who was the last guy who wrote that poem?
Henry Labouchere. Labouchere.
Okay.